Okay, good afternoon everyone and welcome to this edition of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. Normally the first item on the agenda is to ask for apologies, but I can see immediately that everybody is present and correct, so well done everybody. I'm glad you were so keen in this sweltering heat to come in and out of the sun. Okay, just to welcome everybody to this meeting. Just to quickly go through health and safety, we're not expecting any fire alarms. If the alarm does go off, then please leave quietly via the main doors and then turn to the right, go down to the bottom of the ramp and over to where Bristol Cathedral is, and then please wait to be signed off by one of the fire officers. Okay, can I ask if there are any declarations of interest? Excellent, thank you. Next we move on to minutes of the last meeting. Lucy?
They're just for approving, Chair, unless anybody has any comments.
Okay, then, if there are no objections then I approve the minutes for the meeting. Agenda item number 5 is Chair's business. I have no Chair's business on this occasion, which moves us on to agenda item number 6, which is public forum. Public forum, we have 3 questions from Dan Ackroyd, and I'll come to you in a moment, Dan. And then we have 2 questions from Laura. Laura's not attending, but we have provided written responses to her questions. And then we also have 2 public forum statements. Neither of the individuals are here was Jen Smith, David Redrow and Gordon Richardson, but their statements would have been read by the members of the committee and are noted. So with that, we'll go immediately to Dan's questions. Dan, what I'll do, if it's okay with you, I'll read out the response to your initial question, and then if you want to, you can follow up. No, everybody happy for Dan to go straight to his follow-up questions? Please.
So question 1B, the answer is red. So question 1B, the answer given was that it's not this committee's job to look at the details and minutes of other meetings. I'm quite confused by that because other legal departments in this council depend on the accuracy of responses given to consider things like code of conduct complaints. So can you advise me if I see that the words written down from the public forum answers are completely don't reflect the answers given by the mayor, where are they recorded properly?
The response to that would be that if you have concerns about the accuracy of minutes or meetings from any meeting, then your first point of call should be to whoever is chairing that meeting, which for full council would be the Lord Mayor, and then seek further advice from the Lord Mayor. In terms of whether you believe there's a breach in terms of a code of conduct or behaviour, then that is within the remit of the monitoring officer, which is Tim O'Gara. So that would be your other choice of action.
And so I'd like to follow up on the question part 1C. The question was, why has a particular video been taken down? The answer given stated merely that a particular video had been taken down, but it didn't give any details of the reason why. So I don't feel like the question's been answered properly.
Yeah, unfortunately, in some instances, there are various reasons why a video might be taken down. Usually they are temporary, and at this point in time, I'm not in a position to be able to tell you why that particular video was taken down. You may, again, want to contact the monitoring officer for further information. My understanding would be that in normal situations, the video will come back up as soon as possible.
So that's a reasonable answer, which I'm going to base my follow-up question on. I'm in a difficult position now. I was going to submit questions to full council based on me listening to and getting accurate details of what was said in that meeting, but I'm unable to because it's been taken down. So this leaves me in a bit of a bind because I can't make an allegation that something happened without checking the details of what actually happened. So I'm blocked from being able to ask questions at the full council.
Just taking some advice on this, I think that what you're saying constitutes a complaint, so what I would recommend is you follow that through the complaints process. I don't know what would be...
I can contact you, Mr. Ackroyd, with the details of how to do that.
Fantastic, thank you. Cool, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Just wanted to say the full council meeting on the 11th of July was actually chaired by me because I was stepping in for the Lord Mayor. If you wanted to follow up on it, feel free to contact me and I'll liaise with the relevant officers with you.
Thank you, Steve. Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get involved in the issues relating to the 9th of August meeting, but it does seem concerning that a meeting that caused such public interest isn't available. If there's a legal reason why it's not available, I think we should say so. If there is a practical reason why it's not available, I think we should say so. But it doesn't seem right that when people are interested, they cannot access something of that importance. And I would guess that Osm might have an opinion on that.
Okay, what I'll do, I'll follow it up with the monitoring officer and see if we can get a fuller explanation. I understand some of the reasons for why in the past items have been taken down, but I'll ask the monitoring officer if he can provide us with a more fuller explanation.
Yeah, I mean, that would just seem to me that if there is an explanation, any member of the public can question the explanation, but at least they know what it is. But if there's nothing there, that just doesn't seem appropriate in the interest of openness and democratic accountability.
Thanks, Jeff. Noted, and I will bring that up with the monitoring officer as well. Councillor Smith.
Sorry, I should have done both my points in one. I just wanted to comment on Dan's question 1A about the 4-year retention for videos. With respect, I'm not convinced this really answers the question, because the question was, why is it 4 years? And the answer is, because it's 4 years. But it seems a little odd, because the minutes of council meetings are kept, as I understand it, forever. I can go to the archives and find minutes from 100 years ago. And the video recordings seem to be a modern version of enabling people to understand what's happened in a meeting. Also, there's nothing to stop someone bringing their own recording equipment, as Dan has done today, and keeping that for as long as they like. So it just seems that's maybe something we could have another look at and just question whether 4 years really is the right length of time for what is a public meeting, and what we say here is on the record.
Yes, thanks, Councillor. So I did check the 4 years situation, and it is indeed because it does tie in with the statutory arrangements relating to the background papers. However, we do review our retention schedule periodically, so I can raise this and just check that we're still content in the modern world that 4 years is still the right retention period for those broadcasts. Thanks.
And Councillor Wilcox, and I'll probably make this the last one because we're turning it into a debate rather than just an opportunity for public forum.
4 years does seem to be a rather arbitrary unit of measurement, because there are recordings of full council dating back from, just checking, June 2017, and that's not 4 years. So we're actually not applying a policy to this. YouTube is essentially free. We should just keep it there, in my opinion.
Okay, well, that was a statement rather than the question, so we'll now move on to the next item of business. My apologies, I completely lost my agenda then. And only realised I actually just turned it over, that's why I couldn't find it. For the moment, we are going to carry on with the agenda as it is in the papers, but I am going to give advance warning that at some point we will probably bring the climate change working group report further up the agenda to allow Councillor Grant to go to an important appointment, I think is the best way to describe it. But we can't do that item until Alex Minster has arrived, because he has a key role to play. So we'll carry on as per the agenda for the time being with agenda item number 7, which is the annual business report, which I believe is you, Lucy.
Yes, hi members. So this is the standard report that of course you do have every year. So most of the recommendations are in there for noting. So we're asking you to note the membership of the board, please, and also to note the terms of reference for the various commissions. But there are a couple of things that you need to decide. So one is if you could agree the dates and times, please, for the meeting. So as you will all know, we have set the meeting dates for October and November. And then with the rest of the dates for the municipal year, we've said that they will be aligned to the Cabinet meeting. So we will work with Councillor Dyer and the OSM leads to finalise those dates in due course. So if you could approve that position, that would be helpful. Thank you. And the other thing that we would like you to do, please, is to agree to establish the call-in subcommittee for this year, and also to note that there will be a rotating chair for that body.
So does anybody have any comments, or can I ask if everybody is happy to approve both of those requests? Yep, no objections. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. That is duly approved and noted. Okay, we'll move on to item number 8 now, which is Goram Homes. And we have Steve, Chris, and Vicky. I knew it was, so I was going to say Victoria, and I suddenly thought you didn't say Victoria last time. So Steve, I don't know, Helen, you've said you're quite happy for us to just go straight to Steve, because yeah, like me, we did plenty of speaking earlier on. So Steve, if you'd like to bring this report.
Thank you, Chair. What we've prepared today for the committee is a presentation to go alongside the annual report. So we'll be ably assisted with the slides moving forward in hopefully an organised manner that I'll be able to follow. So myself and Chris will lead through the presentation. We'll have time at the end of the presentation for questions, but also if there's something that occurs to you as you go, please stop us and ask. So number 2 slide. Thank you very much. So this financial year, 22-23, which we're here to talk about today, really set the groundwork for us as an organisation. We started building in One Lock Lees, our development at Romney House. We set up a skills academy, which is offering free construction courses on site. And we made huge progress on the largest site, Goram's Pipeline at Hengrove Park. We started work at Hengrove on what we call the bookends, which is the first phase of development of the Hengrove Master Plan. And we've procured a partner for the wider development of the rest of the 1,435 homes. We've also, in that year, started consultation on the detailed plans for the next phase of the Master Plan development on the park as it is at the moment. Next slide, please. We secured planning permission for hundreds more homes in the north and south of Bristol at Dover Court Road and New Fossway Road. And this is a picture of Dover Court Road. Next slide, please. As you can see from the map, we're working on sites across the city, from the north to the south, as I said a moment ago, some of which are more advanced than others. There's a lot of complex sites in Bristol that we're working on. We're having to adjust our programmes as we move forward and be dynamic in our approach, also reflecting what's happening in the housing market at the moment. Some of the sites are in planning permission phase, and we're working with the local community, along with Castle Park, as an example, and Portwall Lane car park in Redcliffe. And we've just started a lot of work with the Novas Hill area development in Philwood with the local community. And to the next one, please. So this is a picture of our very first project, which you will all know is not a house as a housing company. So this was our energy centre that we built in the park. We're delighted that that's up and running and working and has won some awards. And really, if you haven't been, I'd encourage you all to go and have a look. It's quite fantastically simple, great bit of kit that we should be able to repeat throughout the city. It does have the largest water source heat pump and has recognised at an international award for its technology, which we're really proud of. And it's now powering homes and businesses through the heat network, which I won't go into because it's outside of my sphere of knowledge. So that's a great achievement and we're really proud of that in 22-23. Next slide, please. So the exciting part of the annual report, as you all know, is the finance section. Chris is going to lead you through the finance section and some of the numbers. As I said, I'm very happy if we stop as we go through the numbers if you've got any questions. What we will be doing is giving you quite a bit of detailed explanation as we go through the numbers so that we can explain any variances as we go. We felt that was probably helpful for the councillors in the room, but please do jump in and ask any questions as we go through. But over to Chris.
Thank you, Steve. Slide 6, yeah. We're pleased to report our financial results are better for the year to 31st March 23 than the business plan, and as a result of taking a prudent approach in a very difficult economic market. In 22-23, we worked closely with our house builder partners to respond to external inflationary pressures and took a measured response. Go to the next slide, please. So the numbers we're presenting today, we're showing our progress against our business plan, and the layout is, and this should be primarily for the balance sheet, slightly different to the statutory accounts. The P&L will map, but this balance sheet slightly different format, but the numbers are consistent with our approved statutory figures. So if we move on to the next slide, which is P&L account. The summary at the bottom is that we made a loss after tax for the year of 0.6 million, which is 1.4 million better than was in our plan. If we want to look at the composition of that, at the top, the ALP participation, our share of profit loss in those partners has improved by 0.4, and that's really a result of a value engineering exercise to tackle inflationary pressures and market volatility. If we then look at our contracting business, different type of business, and if I take the revenues and costs as one item, they're lower than was in the business plan because at the year-end decision was made to hold the Hengrove's bookends in work in progress in our balance sheet rather than invoice and trade it through. So that's what generates that. Our operating costs are pretty much in line with what we said. And if we take our results from the LLP participation, our contracting business, together with our operating costs, our loss before interest and tax at 1.4 is, as I said, about 0.4 better than in our original plan. So then, if we look at the interest section, if I take interest receivable and payable together, we're 0.4 million better again than in our plan on that line, which gives us loss before tax of 1.2 million. Then there's a slight difference to the business plan in the next line because corporation tax, which we didn't plan, there's a corporation tax credit in there, which is a result of conversations with our auditors at year end, where they have improved confidence in our forward projection for profitability and have therefore recognised a deferred asset for that corporation tax, which was not in our plan. So that's why that's changed. It's an accounting change. And that delivers the loss after tax of 0.6 million that I mentioned at the beginning, which again is 1.4 million better than we had anticipated. If we change slide to 9, or have we already gone? What's happened here?
Back one, I think. There we go.
There we are. I thought we bypassed the balance sheet. So I'll pick out a few headings in here. So the assets section at the top and liabilities section at the bottom. The assets section is the summation of the 5 lines below. Just by way of understanding, the debtors figure includes things like work in progress on the bookends, interest receivable and corporation tax. The capitalised pre-ARP costs, that's quite specific to our business. This is where we incur costs on things like surveys to progress planning, pending identification and formation of an ARP, at which point it then moves across and the ARP pick it up and run with it. Other things in here, the ARP build lease, that's our relationship with the ARP. That's higher than was in the plan because, again, of that re-engineering exercise that I referred to earlier, the value engineering. The share of LP retained reserves, that's the mirror of the P&L move. So that's that one. Banking cash is healthy at the moment, though we're obviously progressing the delivery of the Hengrove's bookends contract, which will eat into that quite rapidly as that's progressing well. And then we get into the liabilities area, where creditors and accruals are significantly higher, and that really is around the deposit on the bookends contract, which sits there until we're allowed to trade it through invoicing. Working capital funding, again, we're not borrowing as much as we had anticipated as we control our costs and what we're expending through targeted spend. The next line is a bit of a typo. It's more broadly interest payable, and some of that is the mirror of the interest that sits in debtors. So between the two, they're net nil, the interest line within those. And the BCC land loan note, that's the back-to-back equivalent of our relationship with Bristol Council. So it mirrors the injection into the ALP. So it's back-to-back, and the reason it's a variance is the same reason. It's the value engineering that was done. Therefore, if the LP loan is higher, so is the relationship between ourselves and Bristol. And that overall, the shareholders' funds are 1.4 million better than was anticipated in the business plan. So that completes that section.
Thanks, Chris. Do you want to keep going? So just to really sum up, thanks, Chris, for all your work on that. And we are in a fluctuating and changing market, I think, as we all know. And we'll continue to work closely with our partners, using their insights to the best to respond to the external pressures that we face in this year and in last year as well. So in slide number 10, we've got some great pictures here of the community work that's happening. This forms part of the social value that we generate through Goram Homes' business model. Some of it is less easy to capture through photographs. These tell really a good story of the things that are happening in the Lockleys area, actually, all of these photographs. These are the conservation volunteers working on sites in Lockleys. It doesn't always rain in Lockleys. There's the pictures, but there's just some sunshine in the one in the middle. And there's the Green Gym, which is being run by a national charity, the Conservation Volunteers as well. Lots going on, and we'll continue to fund these projects all the way through the development with our partners, Countryside, improving areas of land for wildlife and encouraging people to get involved in the community projects. So this is running really, really well. There's a lot of information that we'll provide in this slide, sit behind this slide and the next one around social value and the numbers. If any of you are interested in that information, please come and see us afterwards. There's just far too much for us to be able to put in any presentation or the annual report, but there's a lot going on. Next slide, please. So just a bit of the headlines really on the social value in this slide. I'd pull out that we had 65 volunteers plant more than 400 trees, 274 wildlife wildflower bulbs and managed more than 100 square metres of meadow in the last financial year. And as I say, this work will continue as we move forward, not just in Lockleys, but will be associated with all the developments that we do. We're also working with the City of Bristol College, which we're talking about as part of our 22-23 report, but those of you who are able to go, there's a great opportunity to meet some really inspiring young people, as I did with the Chief Exec of Countryside Partnerships, and it was really great to meet those young people who are at the beginning of their careers in the construction industry and how we're able to support them get their first jobs. So we're working with the City of Bristol College to do that, and that's really quite an exciting thing for us to be able to do in the One Lockleys development. And as I say, if you want any more information, please do get in touch and we can let you have some more of the detail behind it. Next slide, please. There's a picture of one of our members of the team that went through the Skills Academy. So that's Reagan. I had a lovely opportunity to have a chat with Reagan when we were up at site. So he's an inspiring, very enthusiastic young man, and he's really gone on to start his career in the way that he wanted to. He's really clearly able to articulate that he wanted the Chief Exec of Countryside's job. So he was after him when he'd met him, and he has got his first job. So he's gone through the training course that he did with us at One Lockleys, and he's got his first job, which was amazing. And it was really nice that he was happy to have his photograph taken and talk to us a little bit about his story. And there were a range of different people that go through those courses, and they were all really inspiring stories that we want to continue to support as much as we can do at Goram Homes. So just an example of the first things that we're doing that we want to build on and do more to create a real lasting legacy in the communities that we work in, because I think it's really, really important part of what we do. So we'll move on, please. So we design our developments, and we've got a really strong track record now of doing that alongside our communities. In 22-23, we held a successful design competition for the Portwall Lane car park, which is the one on the picture on the left. That's after a number of years of work with the local community, and we're really pleased with the outcome of that design competition. We now work with the community to find a delivery partner. And the photograph on the left is a bit more recent, but is actually the winning design for the Novus Hill development in Filwood, which again we did very close work with the community in and around the area of the Western Slopes. And the members of the Friends of the Western Slopes actually joined the working group to help select the right design for that sensitive area in the city, and we're delighted with the outcome as we move forward with our plans for delivery of that project. Next slide, please. A little bit on our people. They're obviously critically important for us as a business. Since I joined as employee number 1, there's now a few people that have come to join, which is nice because it was a bit lonely to start with on my own. Now we've got a really established team, which is great, really experienced in their field. We've been really lucky to be able to attract some really very, very good people to work in our business, which is really pleasing. And this was at a property awards in Bristol, and we won a number of awards that night, including one won by our development director, Christiana, and that was voted by her peers in the industry as a rising star, and we were delighted, as was she, that she won that award. And we continue to invest in our staff, and we are pleased to report that we have a stable organisation now that's satisfied with its place to work. So some really good data coming through to be shared with the shareholder around satisfaction as well from the team. So next slide, please. You'll be pleased to know that this is my last slide, and just summing up where we are for the 22-23 year, which I would very quickly summarise as our first full year of trading after we'd been through the setup phase of establishing Goram Homes. We got our first spades in the ground at One Lockleys, which took us a long time. It was a lot of work by everybody to get there, and we're delighted to be off and running, as well as Hengrove, which we really managed to accelerate very quickly. So that was really pleasing to be able to get to site quickly and start delivery on the Hengrove bookends. And a number of planning permissions achieved in that year as well. we as a team do try and reflect regularly the things that we've achieved as we go through, because it's such a busy city. We run a lot and we're going really fast, and we need to spend that time to reflect back. And I think that's really, really important. And in this year, as we look forward, 23-24, we're focusing on 4 primary sites, which is reflected in our 23 business plan. That's really to try and drive home the delivery to meet the emerging trends that we saw at the beginning of 2023, and that's delivery of One Lockleys, really pushing forward the Hengrove development, securing Dovercourt Road as reserve matters planning, which is now moving forward very well, along with moving forward reserve matters for New Fossway Road. We expect those to both start on site imminently. We also, going back to One Lockleys, expect to have our first completions this calendar year. So we're expecting homes to be finished around about Christmas time. Those 4 projects there, which are keeping us busy this year, are around 2,000 homes, and over 1,000 of those will be affordable homes as well, helping a little bit with the council's housing waiting list. I'd just like to repeat Chris's statement around the figures. We're pleased to be able to report our performance against our business plan for 22-23, and we'd like to keep doing all the good things we're doing in the coming years, and very happy to take questions. Next slide, please.
Okay, thank you, Stephen and Chris. Councillor Fodor, I think you already had your hand up. Anybody else?
All right. Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks very much for all the information. It sounds very positive. I've got 2 different questions. One relates to the numbers and the balance sheet, and you did suggest, the market is uncertain. What are the implications of falling house prices or house prices that are not rising while interest rates are high, in terms of any that involve sales and mortgages? That's the first question.
Yeah, so if I do the house prices one first, and then you can ask Chris a really difficult question on the balance sheet, please. So in terms of our business structure, we have inbuilt flexibility to be able to respond to the housing market really quite fluidly before we formally form a limited liability partnership. So at the moment, the majority of our projects are pre-legal formation of the limited liability partnership. We're able to look at the revenue, so the house price revenue, so the house prices move around. We're able to look at that and balance that at the point of when we commence the development. When we get on site, as we are in Lockleys, what we need to do is look at, with our partners, who are national house builders, the data that they've got around house prices, the rate at which we construct, actually build the houses, so how quickly should we build the houses, to ensure that we're maintaining delivery of affordable housing as fast as we possibly can do, but also protecting the commercial return that we need to deliver as a commercial company. So there is a balance to be had. And what's actually happened is that we've seen, since the commencement of our partnership at One Lockleys, is exactly that. So the market has become more complicated and more difficult as we've progressed through the development. We've worked hard with Countryside, who've been excellent, and Chris has reflected some of the value engineering work that we've done with them. And we've also looked at phasing. So we've been able to accelerate some of the affordable housing delivery. So there are a number of things that we work with our partners to mitigate as we go along, but we look at that on a month by month and quarter by quarter basis and really take a view as to what's happening in the market as we go forward. So it's quite a dynamic position that we take. So we then, so that you're aware of what happens, is we do that work, we report that into our board, and then into through a strategic line and into the shareholder our performance. And we did that today, really giving an update onto where we are. So we remain dynamic and trying to follow the housing market. I think that we're in a period of transition, and we'll wait and see. But we're at the moment fortunate that we're able to be flexible across the majority of our developments, and we're satisfied that we've got a good structure in place with a strong partner in Countryside on Lockleys and Romney House.
Okay. Thanks. But if I could just ask a different question next, in terms of social value, you're using the TOMS framework. It says, are those firstly, are those figures available? And secondly, do you seek a certain proportion of social value in relation to the turnover or the value of the projects?
So in terms of what do we seek at the beginning, we seek the partner that's delivering the most social value as part of our assessment criteria for our allocation. So at the beginning of the project, we ask partners to submit their proposals for social value, and we take that into account when we make placing the forming the partnership, with that developer, that we're clear what it is that they're proposing to do. In terms of social value, can you ask me the first part of the question again?
Are the numbers available?
Yes.
Yeah. And the relationship to the turnover?
Yeah, so if you want, I can provide you with each project's TOMS score, and we can share with you, outside of the public domain, it's confidential information, but we can share with you, I'm very happy to, the submission of what they said they were going to do at the tender stage and their current numbers. And the TOMS that we use are a mix of national ones and also some of the council's TOMS as well, that we create a bespoke suite that we just use for us.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Councillor Wilcox and then Councillor Gollop.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for your report, Stephen. I'm looking at page 47 or page 18 of your bundle. You talk about having a strong pipeline for 3,000 homes. Can you provide a list of, or a number for those homes that have passed every planning hurdle, please?
So how many homes have got full planning?
Yeah.
So I can, because it's one development, which is one Lockleys, which is 268.
Right, okay, so you're looking for 2,700 more homes to get full planning permission.
Yeah, so I think, as you're aware, a number of the developments go through 2 phases of planning permission. So yep. Dover Court Road being an example of a development in your ward. So that has got outline. We're now working to get full planning permission. So, we are relatively new as an organisation, so a lot of our projects still are working through the planning phase. So, the rest of the projects that are available, the numbers are available on our website, are in different phases of the planning system. And actually, in the map that I've shared today, it shows you which ones are in an outline and which ones are before outline. So we kind of do go through, in some instances, not always, go through a 2-stage process through planning. We're reviewing that internally, actually, because I kind of feel that it would be easier for us to have conversation with the community if we did it once in planning and we said, this is what we're going to do, and then we do one plan. Doing it iteratively, I think, can be quite difficult for the community to follow. So we'll look at whether we do much outline in the future, so we might do more full to the beginning.
Indeed, that question was phrased as a bit of a plug for November's Growth and Regeneration Scrutiny panel, where we will be having a planning item, and I would like you to come as a specialist guest of actually using the planning system and how you think it could be actually improved.
Yeah, very happy to do.
I've got one more question, if you don't mind, Chair. Quick, and it's another quick one, don't worry. You talk about 2,563 homes being built in Bristol. How many did Goram Homes actually build that people are moved into and living in, please?
So how many have we constructed that are complete? Yeah. As I said in my presentation, the first homes will be built and constructed for Christmas this year at one Lockleys development. So this will be our first development that we will have completed homes for. So at the moment, as we sit here today, there are none complete, but they will be by Christmas.
And you say you're fairly new to the block, but how many years has Goram Homes been working?
So I joined in 2019. We had to establish a lot of the back office and push a lot of difficult projects through the planning system. So I think that we stand up well against other startups in the similar sector. So as we all know, we've got a range of very complicated projects through the city. So it's taken us a little bit of time to make sure that we consult with the communities and try and take people with us through what is a difficult planning journey.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. I think it's also worth pointing out that delays in planning is not just something that's affecting Goram Homes. There is major delays to planning even before we get to planning committee, but also after planning committee and getting decision notice. And I think that applies to everyone. Councillor Gollop.
Thank you, Tony. I'll start by saying, I mean, this is the most positive report you've been able to present to us, and not least because there's some building going on and there's something happening. In past years, you've shown a forecast showing how long it was going to take to get to break even. Interestingly, that's missing this year, but the auditor's acceptance of the deferred tax asset is an indication that you've convinced them that it's going to be sustainable and turn into profit. But it would be really useful to have that information and understanding so that we could see the projections. So that would help. In terms of the presentation and the report, it would have helped me to have a brief narrative on the corporation tax, because to find a corporation tax income that's coming in at 60, or was it 50% of the loss, did raise questions. You've now answered that. But, and there's always a but, when I look at the figures, to see the cumulative profit and loss figure 1.4 million better than the business plan is good. But 600k of that comes from the deferred tax. And then I look and see that also another 500k comes from interest receivable. Now, I get a bit confused about the flows in and out of Goram, but am I right in thinking that the interest payable is payable to the City Council and appears to be on budget, and therefore I would conclude not varied with the rate of interest, whereas the interest receivable, which I presume is coming from the joint venture partner, has gone up and therefore appears to be linked to rates of interest. So if I'm scrutinising this from the point of view of the company, I'd say you've done well. That's good. But my question will then probably be directed to Stephen or Helen to actually say, but why hasn't the council's interest receivable gone up as well? Because if we've had £500,000 more interest coming into Goram, and that hasn't been paid away to the City Council, then effectively Goram is going to be paying, when it pays corporation tax, 125k more corporation tax, and the City Council has less profit to withdraw. I don't necessarily expect answers, because I realise that's not the most straightforward of questions, so I don't expect it today. All right, Helen, I wasn't going to put you on the spot that much, but it would be helpful to understand, because given the council's finances, I think 125k of tax being paid out is sufficient for us to want to know that that's covered. So I would like some feedback on that in due course if we could.
Shall I pick it up? Yep. Not to answer all of your question, but to give you some assurance, the interest chargeable to us and payable to council is higher than planned. There are other elements within our financing structure that are commercially sensitive, but happy to share it in a separate session. If you'd like to call me, that'd be fine.
Councillor Townsend.
Thank you. So my questions are in relation to this academy that you've set up. You said that you're working with the City of Bristol College around it. I'm also interested to understand what WECA's involvement is, because this is adult skills. And my second question is about targeting the disproportionality groups that we know need this kind of employment and skills input, and how you're planning for that.
So was the first question about WECA?
Yeah, because it's adult skills that you're delivering.
So in terms of any WECA funding, it would be funding that I'm not aware of to City of Bristol College. So there's no funding from anybody other than us for the Skills Academy, so it's funded by the development, so there's no WECA money going into it. All the attendees are all coordinated by the City of Bristol College.
Right. So from a council's perspective, I mean, maybe this is something we need to discuss, or we need to look at this in people's, because there's certain groups that we know from the council's perspective that will be overrepresented in unemployment, in lack of skills. We've got care leavers that are not in skills and employment. Those are the sorts of groups that, as a council, we need to be making sure are having no access to this kind of opportunity. And as a company that was set up by this council, I would have expected that that element would be in there with the thinking and the planning alongside with the college.
I can answer that one.
Okay.
So I work for Goram Homes. I'm the head of communications, and I've been involved with Partners in Bristol, which is the subsidiary of City of Bristol College. So they actually receive referrals from local job centres into the Skills Academy. That's one way. They also do lots of outreach to the exact groups that you're talking about. But there's nothing to stop us from directly doing that ourselves. So it only opened just before the summer holidays. So I think there's probably lots more we can do to ensure we're getting the right referrals through. And if we think there are any gaps in the work that Partners in Bristol is doing, we can certainly talk to you about other opportunities. We also work with Maria from the Lockleys Hub, who has insight on the ground within Lockleys. And I know she's also referring people into the scheme too. So what I would say is there's many opportunities to do more if there's gaps.
Councillor Bernard, I think you wanted to say something.
I think, just briefly, it's a really important point you're raising. You're pushing it an open door. We've also been doing some stuff around with the HRA as well. So, getting people our care leavers. So there was some shadowing done of cabinet members recently. So you'll be pushing an open door to kind of look at what more we can be doing.
Yeah, the WECA stuff concerned the fact that WECA's not aware. Are they aware even the adult skill? Maybe it's more for us to kind of raise this around the adult skills agenda that we know WECA holds.
Yeah, I think there is the potential there, because we do know that WECA have got some responsibility for skills funding, but I think that's probably something we need to, through other channels, talk to WECA rather than with Goram Homes. Goram Homes can only make use of the funding that they've been provided with.
I think that's fair. I mean, the point about care leavers, for example, is something we've identified internally as something we need to bring more into the fore, in terms of not leaving it to meetings like this to say our door is open, which it always is, but actually we have our head of employment skills, Jane Taylor, for example, in our children's and education directorate for a reason, and that's because we want to tie these things together. The point about WECA is also relevant, because obviously we have a role in commissioning what gets done and also designing the delivery model. You're right to say it's not WECA's job, Goram's job to make all those dots join up. It's our job as officers, so we'll take that one away as part of the work we're doing around sort of think children, think care leavers, which is something we're keen to push on.
Councillor Bradshaw.
Thanks, Chair. I think you've done well to weather the current economic storms, to turbulent interest rates and all the rest of it, which obviously is having a huge impact on the residential market. I'm also interested in the Skills Academy, but I've got a slightly different sort of slant on this, and I have asked this in the past. I think Lockleys is a great innovation, but are you doing something similar in South Bristol, where the College of Bristol is based and the Advanced Construction Hub is based? And that, I believe, was a WECA-supported initiative with government funding. So I'd like to see something along the same lines, replicated, proportionate at scale in the south of the city, where there are also great needs. Second question is on the geography of operation. This might be a very simple answer, but looking at the map of where your developments are, both the ones that have been consented and those in the pipeline, there's a skew apart from Lockleys to the west of the city. Is there anything coming forward or anything that prevents you doing more in the east of the city, where we know there are great pressures in terms of homes and the quality of homes. And last question is, with the demise or the increasing demise of Holdco, I noted in the detailed report that you had tightened up arrangements on risk and audit. If you could quickly just explain what those are.
So Hengrove and the South of the City Skills Academy, the very brief answer is, and thank you for raising it again, is yes. So we continue to work with City of Bristol College. It is part of the successful bidder submission that we'll replicate the work that we've done at Lotley's in the north and create another skills academy at the south. It's really, really important that we make sure that we do more than just the skills academy. So the skills academy is one thing that we can do. The college needs to be able to offer people opportunities to be able to work in a real construction environment that is relevant to the work that you do. If you go onto site now, the classrooms still need to move forward into the space where the construction industry is, and actually the development of the master plan at Hengrove is a great opportunity. So we've been working very closely with the college on that. We are a little way away from starting on site on phase 1B, but we intend to do that. There has been some link up on the bookends, but not very much at the moment, because that's the beginning of really ramping up its production. It's been doing groundworks at the moment and the highways alterations. But we do see there's a huge opportunity. They're next door to one another. The college see that as well. There'll be some really interesting and innovative heat solutions as well. There'll be another energy centre with Hengrove. That's a massive opportunity for the students at the Advanced Skills Academy in City Bristol College. There aren't many places where you can go and see that type of technology. So we think, and as do the college, there's a massive opportunity, and we will definitely be replicating it at the south of the city. Any insights from wards in the south of the city that would benefit from the Skills Academy, please do let us know. Feedback in, and if we can make it better, we will do. Geography, our geography and our sites, I think as you know, are driven by land availability from the council. So the council is completely in control of the projects that it asks us to get involved in. The north-south, almost in a line, developments that we have at the moment are a product of the projects that the council officers have asked us to become involved in. I'm not aware of much to the east of the city that we've been asked to get involved in. We'd be very happy to get involved in projects to the east of the city. I'm just not aware of any at the moment that are on our radar. But again, if you become aware of any projects, then raise it with either a council officer or with ourselves. We can have a dialogue with the team. We work very closely with the council. But yeah, I've often observed that it is just a straight line north and south at the moment. I don't think that's any sort of cunning plan to go north to south and forget the east. So very happy to support in the east of the city if we can. In terms of Holdco and what we've been doing, so we've appointed a chair of audit and risk and a member of independent member of the audit and risk committee. They're fully established and fully working. They're meeting regularly in advance of the board meetings and doing a lot of work around risk and also other areas in terms of our internal audit plan. We updated the shareholder on that progress this morning, and actually I commented this morning, and I will again, of the huge value that having our own audit and risk chair has brought to us as a company and a board. It's given us an extra tier of challenge, which has been most welcome. We've also been focusing heavily in recent months on integrating a performance management system that we showed to the shareholder today, which is driven through Power BI, where we've linked our key performance indicators and our key risks and our objectives, and they're all mapping and reading across in a performance management suite that enables, we hope, the shareholder and our board to have a really live view about what's happening within the company. We continue to work with the council on that, and our next business plan that we actually start planning for in October, and we'll come back and see Osm again when we've got that draft business plan. There'll be an opportunity for us to drill into those key performance indicators that will read into the key risks for the company, so the council will be able to see performance and be able to map it across. So Chris and the team have been doing a huge amount of work on that. But in summary, we found enormous benefit with having dedicated specialist resource for us as a company to be able to put on in the audit and risk area has been a big advantage for us.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Andrew Brown, and Andrew, as Chair of Audit, will probably also mention that we have Goram Homes coming to audit, and we have other items from the companies coming to audit as well.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Coming back to Councillor Townsend and Councillor Bradshaw's points about the Skills Academy Act and targeting that at people in real need, and really conscious that Hengrove, which is in my ward, so I've got a dog in this race, but there are pockets of multiple deprivation, not just in Hengrove, but in Hartcliffe, which is adjacent, Philwood, which is adjacent. So it's really important if we can get those skills to people in those communities. That'd be great. I was going to ask a question similar to the question that Councillor Fodder asked when he was talking about, obviously the housing market is going through a bit of turbulence. That's going to have an impact. You've obviously been doing, taking a number of measures to respond to. This happened at audit a few months ago. Oh, it's back. Okay, we're back. Lovely, thank you. Okay, so so I was asking about sort of construction costs. Obviously, you've taken measures in the year that this relates to manage that, and presumably you've been continuing that sort of management process. What's your assessment of the risks going forward? We're obviously seeing CPI has started to fall, but I don't know how that's translated into the construction market. Do you feel that the worst is over in terms of those sort of pressures, or is it still going to be quite challenging going forward for some time?
So, what I think is that what we see in terms of pricing is not a linear movement in the cost of things. So things aren't nicely becoming more expensive and cheaper. So on our monthly meetings with our partners, what we see is that we'll see an initial trend for some costs to start to come off, and then we'll see some other things become more expensive. It's become quite complicated in terms of being able to easily assess where the supply side of our business is. So it's not easy to bulk everything in and say everything is getting cheaper. That hasn't been the trend. Some things have got really ridiculously expensive, and those are now starting to come off. And it's due to a range of different factors. So timber product was extremely expensive at one point in the past. It's not so much now. That's because all the timber was somewhere else where it should have been over here, because that was to do with shipping. So there are lots of very complicated interconnected factors that drive costs in our business. I'd say that costs at the moment are stable. There's a lot of organisations looking at how much work they're doing, and a lot of organisations looking at pricing. So I'd say at the moment our cost position is stable rather than high or getting higher or getting lower. It's stable as a cost position. I think that the next 3 months, so between now and when we come back and see you again around about Christmas time, are important for the housing market. This is a time traditionally where summer holidays are over and we have a period of activity between now and Christmas where there is a drop-off. So in terms of what happens, we will respond to the housing market as it responds to interest rate changes and also demand for mortgages. So again, it's not as simple as to say that interest rates will go up and mortgage rates will go up, because that again hasn't necessarily been the pattern. So we've seen interest rates not come down, but mortgage rates come down. So what we need to do is we need to be mindful of a range of different factors. We have the advantage of being pre-contract on a lot of our LLPs. We can reflect and respond to that. And then we have tried and tested processes through the One Lockleys development that we can apply at future developments to try and mitigate the situation that we may find ourselves in the future. But I think that it would be unreasonable for me to forecast really very far forward because we're in such a volatile and an unusual market that we can't respond back to or reflect back on what may have happened 10 years ago. Those don't really work as comparables. Our partners really give us such a strength and a depth of knowledge that we as alone as a business would not have. We would be able to have a degree of knowledge, but we work with national organisations that have national contracts for buying and a national picture of the housing market. That really is, I feel, a very strong advantage for us as a partnerships business, that we're able to look across the country and drill down into them placing individual contracts with individual trades all over the country and see where prices are. And they are as good as it comes in terms of driving that cost position for them as a business, because that's the principle behind their profit making.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. I'm conscious that we've spent quite a bit of time on this now. Councillor Fodor, I think you may have the last question, unless any of those you haven't spoken yet. No.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll keep it brief. So you've just played up the strengths for a company of 8 people to work with national partners. Is there any alternative case for you being more locally focused, more of a local business with local connections?
Yes. So it's critically important for us that we share the benefits of the developments that we do with the local people. The types and the scale of the work that we do, we need to find the most appropriate partner to do that. We have strong commercial drivers within our business plan, and we need to be mindful of that. However, we do drive our partners to ensure that we're getting local labour. So that is important. Countryside are one of our big partners, but they are based also regionally. So they may be a national PLC, but they have an office in Bristol. And they employ lots of local people to work on the development projects. So we do track that. It is important, and it is important that we try and push as much of the work to stay local to benefit the people of Bristol. It's something that we need to remind ourselves of, and we do internally work along the lines of making sure that we're making sure that spend is local with internal targets to keep that money within the city. So it's good to challenge on that point. There are developments that are more suited to the local market. So, for instance, when we get to Novas Hill, which is a smaller development, we'll look for other more locally based partners potentially to come on board with us. But we need to make sure that we get the right partner ultimately to be able to deliver the projects that are the right projects for us in terms of their scale. So it's kind of limited by what's available as well within the Bristol market in terms of ownership of businesses.
You have a follow up on that, Martin?
Well, just one different aspect to that then. So is there scope in projects that you've outlined that are still coming for some community-led housing component in the developments?
Yep, so Novas Hill development has an element of community-led. We've allocated that as definitely coming forward for community-led development. So that will be coming forward with a parcel of community-led. We'll monitor that and see how that goes. And that's maybe something that we can replicate in the future.
Okay, thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Chris and Vicky. Now calls upon Osm to note the report, which I believe we have done. Thank you very much for your contribution. Shame to see you go, Steve. I mean, I felt like I spent the entire day with you today.
Oh, right, just today. That's good.
Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item number 9. I'm hoping that we can go through this relatively quickly. So this is for the Climate Change Working Group, and I'll pass over to Councillor Grant to present a report. You can sit down and present from where you were sat, I think. We only make members of the public stand.
I see. Got it. Although I do feel like I did a pre-presentation at the last OSM meeting, didn't I? From there. Anyway. Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Chair. Thanks for trying to accommodate my timing as well. I definitely don't want to rush through this, though, so I'm hoping there will be questions and discussion, and, yeah, don't feel constrained to dig deep. So this is the first report of the Climate Change Working Group, which was set up by OSM to look at its own emissions, the Council's own emissions, which have a deadline of 2025, and the wider city emissions, with a deadline of 2030 to achieve net zero in theory. These are imminent deadlines, and here we are on a journey led arguably by the council, but bringing so many different players in the city with it. So in that sense, I think this working group's creation is not a moment too soon. We're also seeing the disconcerting narrative taking place in the UK at the moment at the national level, looking as if commitments around net zero are being withdrawn or questioned. And I think the Mayor thinks, that cities really particularly have a very vital role to play in all of this. So I think for the City Council in Bristol, having called a climate emergency in 2019, to now be sort of strengthening its scrutiny of our progress is a very good thing. I have had it pointed out to me that the report doesn't go anywhere specific on the membership, and so I'd like to just be a bit clearer on who we were. We are a 9-member group composed of 3 members from the Green Party, 2 from Labour, 2 from Conservatives, 1 Liberal Democrat and 1 from the Knoll Community Party. More specifically, myself as chair, Councillor Katja Hornchen as the deputy chair, and Councillors Martin Fodel, Heather Mack, Fabian Breckles, Mark Weston, Henri Michelet, Andrew Varney and Gary Hopkins compose the whole group. I'm here today to ask you, OSM, to consider the report. I hope you've all had the chance to read it, and to provide any comments, feedback or questions on our recommendations, with a view to forwarding the report to the relevant Cabinet member for climate, ecology and waste, energy and waste. Just to stress, again, it's in the report, we felt quite strongly that the working of the group should be very much defined by the non-political nature of the climate emergency. Obviously, this council was the first city to call that emergency, and it's just only getting more urgent, and in that sense will, you know, overtake us potentially, and we need to set aside all of the non-technical political barriers to looking for good solutions here. We were keen to ask the city to be as ambitious as it possibly can. Arguably, there should already be a scrutiny committee dedicated to the climate and ecology emergencies and our action on them, with also lateral climate elements, meaning metrics, costings, things of that sort in all that the council does. So yes, we were keen to provide as much encouragement and push as possible in the course of the examination. We, as a committee, learnt an enormous amount about the really groundbreaking work that is being done in Bristol by Alex Mitchell and his climate team. Fantastic work that's been going on now for some years and remains ongoing. Especially recently, we've just learnt about the EU 100 Climate Neutral and Smart Cities mission, and the Net Zero Investment Co-Innovation and the relationship with Innovate UK. So it's very much, very, very much a dynamic arena. New things are coming along all the time. To speak a bit to the recommendations, the first piece, the first set of recommendations pertain to the sort of governance and what we hope will be the future of the working group, that there should be, the future beyond the working group and more immediately of the working group. Once 2024 comes along and we have our new governance system in place, we would really like to ask for an Environment and Sustainability Policy Committee to be established, which will interact with the One City Environment Board and the Advisory Committee, that be a strong and agreed and meaningful thing before we get there. And that in advance of that, we are able to extend the role of this working group in the months that remain between now and the next election. We're aware that this is no small thing for council officers who are going to be very busy anyway, but there's just an enormous amount to do. There are lots of areas we didn't at all look at yet, including pretty central areas for the net zero journey: food, procurement, transport, the built environment, climate finance, waste, things of that sort. So in terms of what we did look at, it does still represent just a sort of minority of the important issues. The group didn't achieve total consensus on this point, although it was a strong majority that would like to see the mandate of the working group extended between now and the next election, to do a few more of these sort of deep dives, as we've called them, that we've been looking at, the ways in which we've been scrutinising different aspects of the council's work. In a way, the failure to achieve consensus underlines the point of all of this, which is that maybe this working group is just one more way for us to get to a common understanding of the urgency and centrality of this net zero issue for all of us in the city. To move to the sort of theme-specific recommendations, the areas we looked at in a bit more detail were data and evidence and partnership. Those are obviously two different topics really, but we looked at them in the same session. Later, energy efficiency and the decarbonisation of the residential space, elements like retrofitting and these efforts made at the sort of private household level to reduce energy use. And then finally, at communications, the council's communications with a whole range of different groups and demographics. The recommendations, I mean, obviously, if you've read the report, I don't want to go into lots of detail on them, but just to sort of recap, we recognise the absolutely crucial nature of this process being data and evidence driven. We were given a good overview of the work of the place of the climate view model for the City Council. This is a relatively new thing, and how central that is to us having a strong evidence base for all of this work and its role in making all of that data available to residents of the city. We talked about carbon metrics and costings and how we could strengthen that accountability in all of the council's activities now and going forward. On the issue of partnerships, we recognised how proud we should be really of all that the council and the city together have done in terms of partnership, the work of One City, its climate ask, the climate strategy, Environment Board, the engagement with the private sector via the Bristol Green Capital Partnership. The working group, have sort of recommended the continued role of the council as lead on coordination and the collaborative efforts being made. Really welcome the creation of the transition team, and we'll look forward to hearing as that goes along as to what they're achieving, and to apply the pressure possible on the private sector, on businesses, to come in line, and where there's not enough being done, and I think there really isn't by many players in the private sector, to see what we can do to encourage and reward those businesses that are leading the way, and to identify also a role for councillors in this, ward by ward, to engage with business communities in their wards, and to let the city know about how all of that is going and what's being done. The recommendations from the energy efficiency, sort of a decarbonisation of the residential space session. Again, we recognise that lots is being done, including most notably and recently the work on Bristol City Leap. This is proving an example to other core cities, so there's a lot going on there. We think it would be really important for the city, for the council to provide better information to city residents about what they can do, what levers and opportunities they have to change the way in which they consume energy in the home, and opportunities to make their homes more efficient, better signposting as to resources and suppliers, take advantage of things like the new centre at Sparks to really reach out to the widest demographic possible, and to recognise in this the need for a just transition. This is very much a difficult time for this conversation. People are still in a cost of living crisis, may well feel they have other priorities. We've got a range of audiences across the city. Not all are equally engaged or informed about this agenda. And there are also groups such as landlords who would need a different kind of interaction, a review of regulation, the ways in which we push landlords to meet their net zero responsibilities, and tougher or clearer rules around the embodied carbon in new construction, new building. Finally, on communications, that was our sort of final deep dive. We talked about all that is being done. The City Council's got a quite developed communication plan, and obviously this is with a range of audiences. There are community action plans being, they're developed and are now being funded and supported, and we want to see that work continue and to get out of them better information on how they're affecting emissions in the city, what other groups can do to emulate and amplify. We talked about the possibility of a larger scale communications campaign led by or very strongly supported by the council, what that might look like. There are existing communications which include positive stories, but this could be something else on a different scale, a campaign funded with maybe public and private monies to try and reach everybody across the city. We talked about engagement with schools and with school children in such a way that we do not make children suffer further from climate anxiety than they already are, and we don't suddenly turn them into those responsible for getting us out of this, but with a view to all that they will be in the future. Engagement with businesses, as I've already mentioned, how to strongly encourage a lot more commitment to the reduction of emissions without putting impossible pressure on small and medium-sized businesses, and to use all of those mechanisms and networks that already exist to reach businesses strongly. So, yeah, in conclusion, we have recognised that there are an awful lot of constituencies across the city who are going to need to keep going to make this work. There are deadlines coming very immediately into view with an enormous gap, despite all the work that's being done, an enormous gap remaining. It's not clear necessarily whether that gap will in fact be met, whether we'll meet those deadlines and targets and what we need to do to accelerate. We've got a relationship with national government to manage its targets. The leadership is or isn't providing the provision of funding and policy support. The City Council needs to think about how it influences WECA with its regional responsibilities and its important funding in areas like skills building for retrofitting. And then these massive emissions and also opportunities in the private sector, as well as other One City partners such as universities, hospitals, and then, of course, the demands and the demand put on us by private individuals and households residing in this city and how their behaviours might be influenced to keep the net zero targets in mind. So lots that's excellent is being done. And the question is, how can we accelerate? How can we keep that gap in view, given that there is world-class sector-specific capability, enormous capacity for innovation here in this city. The council's very much in the driving seat, to use a non-net zero metaphor, but we have this very long way to go and not much time. So on that basis, the working group, would like to ask OSM to take the Climate Change Working Group as seriously as it can, to promote this report to Cabinet and to extend the mandate of the working group with a view to entrenching net zero accountabilities everywhere in the work of the City Council.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Grant. Just to remind members that what we're being asked to do is to note and comment on the report and refer it to Cabinet. I just wanted to raise a couple of points. Cabinet, the next Cabinet meeting is tomorrow. My recommendation is that we actually refer the report to the October Cabinet, which is the 3rd of October. The reason why I'm making that recommendation is because that will then give opportunities for further discussion, and also members of the public may want to comment, or even members or councillors within the council. I think also I have to be pragmatic and open about the fact that OSM and Scrutiny in general does have a very full workload. So if we do decide to go ahead with further editions or further meetings of the Climate Change Working Group, we may, or we'll almost certainly need to look at what else we'll have to drop from the work programme going forward. So that may need us to have a further discussion at OSM leads to discuss that. However, with those comments, I'm happy to open it up to comments. Does anybody have anything to say? Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And actually, I was pretty much going to echo what you just said about workload. It's not to, disrespect or devalue anything that the working group has done, but I guess I'm slightly nervous about having, and maybe I've misunderstood what's in here, but it kind of foreshadows the future committee that will exist after May. But I think there's one governance structure at a time, and at the moment the Cabinet runs the council, and I don't think we're not creating shadow policy committees for any of the other ones that are going to exist after May. So I'd be a bit nervous. So if it's going to be a scrutiny committee, if that's what we want to do, then we would need to create a new scrutiny committee. But I'm not sure, given that we've already created a work programme for the year, that we've got the scope and the resource to do that. But it's one to take forward, but there'd be a cost to it in terms of stopping doing something else, I think.
Can I just quickly respond to that? I think we won't be in a position to be able to create a new committee. We'd already ruled that out previously when we looked, because at one point we were looking at potentially creating a climate change policy committee, scrutiny committee. But it was felt that with the move to the committee model working group, it would require a lot of change, which perhaps would not be fully, we would not get the full benefits of. However, I think what potentially might be a discussion is whether we have an inquiry day of some sort. But again, that would very much depend on our capacity. I am conscious, and I'm trying not to look at Councillor Wilcox as I say this, but I am conscious that a recent motion was passed which also committed us to another inquiry day. So we may have to put the two of you in a room and let you fight it out together.
And as it happens, I'm bringing a motion asking for another one next week, so perhaps I won't shout too loudly about that. I also have just a couple of more detailed points on some of the recommendations, if that's okay. The first one, I can't remember writing, A1 I think it is, talks about the future Climate Change Committee having the clear leadership on climate change, which obviously makes sense. But there's a bit of complexity there because obviously it's cross-cutting and all of the policy committees have an impact on climate change and on net zero. And what we don't want to end up with is the committee that looks after transport or parks or waste making a decision that has an impact on net zero, for positive or negative, and then the Climate Change Committee stepping in and saying, hang on a minute, you can't do that, that's us. So we just need to what we don't want to do is create a kind of de facto cabinet by saying anything to do with climate change sits under the Climate Change Committee, because everything is to do with climate change. Does that make sense? So I'm not saying it shouldn't, there's just complexity that we need to take into account there.
Totally agree, and I may not have, you know, nodded hard enough to that, but the sort of horizontality and verticality of it is perfectly apparent. I agree with you. I think, you know, mainstreaming things sometimes gets them lost, so there is an argument for sort of doing both. And the Cabinet does indeed have a member for, you know, for that portfolio, without that Cabinet member wrecking the happiness of all his colleagues, if you should. I mean, I think it can be done, but obviously this would be something for next year's committee system to work out.
Yeah, and the only other one I wanted to mention, I didn't write down the recommendation number, but we were talking about communication and openness and data, is the one key figure that I actually really struggled to find, and I did when I was working on this on WECA as well, is actually how far have we got to go? How close are we to achieving the 2025 goal or the 2030 goal? My suspicion is we're not really very close at all. But I think if we can't, you know, if that number isn't flashed up on a massive dashboard pinned to the front of this building somewhere so that everybody can see it, I think it, you know, we talk a lot about net zero by whatever date it is, and I just think we ought to be as open as we possibly can be with people about where we are and what that actually means.
I wonder if if you actually want an answer number on it now or something approximate, I might...
Just a comment, don't worry.
So there's a few... My name's Alex Minshaw, I'm Sustainable City and Climate Change Manager. And I saw there was quite a few eyes looking at me at that when that question was asked, so I'll try and answer it. In terms of the City Council's direct emissions, our Scope 1 and 2 emissions, which is sort of our direct burning of electricity, gas or diesel, we're at about, we've reduced it from the 2015-16 baseline by about 55+%. Towards the 2025 target, and Cabinet tomorrow are approving a very substantial investment in decarbonisation through Bristol City LEAP programme to take us very close to that figure as well. So that will address the majority of our the vast majority of our energy consumption in buildings through that programme. And then it's a city, we're at around the we've reduced emissions from the 2005 baseline for our territorial emissions. That's the burning of fossil fuels within the boundary and the consumption of electricity within the boundary by about 43% since 2005. And that's pretty much consistent with the sort of national picture.
Thank you, Alex. Steve, have you completed? Or? I've got Councillor Fodor next and then Councillor Bradshaw.
Thanks very much, Chair. And thank you for the very detailed report that we've just heard, Councillor Grant. I was part of that working group, so I'll make that clear at this stage. I'm not sure that anyone else in this Oversight and Scrutiny Management Board has been. So I read the summary with not only interest but also having contributed to the work. Just a couple of thoughts. Firstly, I think the Committee Model Working Group has already discussed the way overlapping agendas and cross-cutting agendas need to be handled. I'm pretty sure it's made clear that there will always be a lead committee for an issue, and that committee will choose, I hope, welcome work with other relevant committees on other policy areas. So it's going to work in the same way that it might have perhaps happened behind the scenes when you have one cabinet member working behind the scenes with a second or third cabinet member. But it will be more public and more explicit because it'll happen in committees unless they set up kind of other sort of bits of work behind the scenes. In terms of the work behind the scenes, I think this working group and the majority of members endorse this, does need to continue to do work as a working group. And the reason is, to me, that all of our partners expect us to continue to tackle the climate emergency between now and our target dates of 25 and 30, and not say, well, we'll stop until we've done all our governance work and kind of got used to that and got going again. So, I mean, I know that sounds a sort of little bit glib, but I think we need to show that a working group can continue to work, and it's worked outside of this commission. It's come back finally to the commission with its recommendations, and I think there are enough leads in those recommendations to say, carry on, do some more work until such time as there is a future governance model in place, which will be after May next year. So, you know, let's not say it's closed, the pieces can be picked up under a new council in May next year. And one particular thing I wanted to highlight in the recommendations, it was worrying that despite all of the wonderful work going on in the city, the expertise, the consultants, the specialists, the companies, the community climate actions, all of those I welcome, I endorse their work. But the fact that only 100 out of 18,000 businesses are actively signed up to something in terms of climate, as far as I can't remember what paragraph it is in the report, I think there is plenty more work to do even just on that, plus the other areas we've identified. You know, that if the council closes its work, I suspect some of those other partners will think there's a bit less support in the meantime, and we need to show we're still active. So I hope we will endorse it. It was a majority recommendation. There's tons of really interesting and valuable stuff going on, and let's recognise it and allow a bit more to go on behind the scenes, like I say, away from these actual meetings, involving various officers, partners, specialists, as necessary, between now and next May. Thanks.
Councillor Bradshaw.
Yeah, I've read the report and very detailed, and clearly lots of work and effort has gone into it. We tend to commission working groups to do a particular piece of work, and then we stand them down when the work is complete. And I'm kind of mindful of the resourcing issue and the pressure, as the chair has outlined. So I think there's some further discussions and some further information to be had on that. On the other side, this is such a massive issue for the city and for the country, and obviously globally, that we can't just park it up until next May and say, well, thank you very much, you know, we're going to move on. So I'm wondering if there's some strand of activity that can be explored in the meantime to show that there is momentum there, and there is, you know, that the council is playing its role in convening and marshalling views. And the business engagement thing is the one that I wanted to raise, as Martin Fodor has. And I suspect that part of the problem is just a confusing number of initiatives, acronyms, projects, funding opportunities. It is not easy for a small business, or indeed anybody, to navigate the current situation in the city. So I wonder if there's a piece of work to be done which is more streamlined and less broad than the work that's been carried out thus far, into the communications and engagement activity, which I think could feed in very well to what comes after May.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Townsend.
Mine's following up on the gentleman behind you, Katie, what you gave us for the statistics for the council. At one point you said, I think you said 2005 was the starting point, is that correct?
So we do have council data going back to 2005, but there's been quite a lot of changes in the way in which we account it as the state of the art has improved. So we're now using the 2015-16 financial year as our baseline, for which we're able to reapply the accounting methodology consistently, so that we can compare those two numbers with confidence. And so that's the figure that I'm referring to. It would be probably another halving if you go back for the previous decade as well.
Okay, and my other question is, do those figures include the council-owned housing stock?
No. So
oh dear.
They're included in the third scope of emissions, called the sort of indirect emissions, which includes also our procured goods and services as well. which are, so those become...
Do you know what, I mean, do you know where we are if we include our council housing stock?
We don't hold data on the energy bills of individuals and therefore their carbon footprints. We have data on the energy performance certificates of the housing stock, and one could infer a likely energy bill and therefore carbon emissions from that. But it would be it would assume, have to make a lot of assumptions about how warm our tenants keep heating their houses. Are they heating them sufficiently? Are they overheating them? And so there could be a great deal of assumption in it, which would probably mask the real performance of it. So we're using, the housing team are using those performance certificates as their benchmark, because they know they can control that. That's about the fabric of the house and not about how the tenant chooses or perhaps is forced to use it because they can't afford to put the heating on, so they have a very low carbon footprint, for example.
Just be
So really we don't know what the carbon footprint is of
we're
our...
starting to talk about the carbon emitters themselves rather than the future of the climate change working group.
I know, but that would be an area that I would like to keep an eye on, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I agree. And there are reports made on a regular basis, but we obviously need to make them more widely available. And Councillor Gollop.
Thank you, Tony. I normally find myself agreeing with most of what Martin says, but I didn't find that today. In the context that Martin said, if we don't keep the climate change working group going, that we're doing nothing about it for the next year. Now, that would be totally unacceptable. But my understanding is that a lot of what's come out of this report is that there was a lot more going on than members were aware of what was going on. And my understanding would also be that that work is going to continue over the next period. So my question, not for Katie, but for all of us, is what can we do that's effective? There is no point in having meetings to look at these very major issues when they are highly important, but they're not ours to solve. That working on solution is for Alex and his colleagues to be working on, and we need to be saying, how can we engage in that in a constructive way? And perhaps the other thing, if we were looking at what we could do, might actually be trying to put forward some priorities that could be relevant for the committee from May. So one could be looking at that, but I'd be very wary of us just trying to ask more and more questions. And we always have to be careful that what we're not doing is interrupting the good work that's being done. If it's talking about how we can promote that good work and know more about it, I'm all for that happening in some way. Whether that needs to be a working group or not, I'm not sure. But particularly with the change in governance system, Scrutiny is trying to be very focused on on its work programme over what is now the next sort of 7 months or so, and working out how we can do that in a way that will interlock with the new committee system. So whatever we do, we have to make sure it's feasible and worthwhile, and not simply time spent talking about very significant issues but not delivering an outcome. So I'm going to need a lot of convincing that we can make that time effective for members. I could see an argument for perhaps with Katie and Alex and others working out what might be a productive inquiry day that could actually help achieve something constructive for the city going beyond next May. And I would hope if we agreed on something like that we could, with Lucy's help, find the resources to make that happen. But I think we've got to be very focused and not just go with something because we think it's important. I don't think there's any doubt that we see this as important, but unfortunately we see another 20 or 30 things as important, and we can't have specific committees looking at those either. So can we sort of make it effective?
Thank you, Jeff. Councillor Smith.
Yes, I think Jeff's pretty much covered what I was going to say, really, that no one's suggesting we should stop working on, or the council should stop working on climate change. Alex and his team will carry on that work led by the Mayor and Cabinet, whether this working group is meeting or not. The question for us is how we best scrutinise that work over the next 7 months, and that's in the context of lots of other stuff we also want to scrutinise with limited resources.
Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to reinforce what I heard, which is effectively what you've heard Alex describe is some aspects of the Mayor's Climate Emergency Action Plan that is effectively the blueprint against which the teams are delivering all these things. You know, it was taken through Cabinet, it is the plan, and it's updated every year. So basically the process of this working group having gone really deep into it, I think is really excellent and positive, but I suppose I would say this, you know, that all of the work that Alex's team's doing is effectively against the administration's stated priorities. I also chair an internal climate and ecology strategic board, so we monitor and look at this all the time. Totally right that scrutiny, you know, gets alongside that, and if there is a need to go deeper, as you've done, get into it. But I guess the right and proper way to look at this is we're delivering the administration's priorities. We can be scrutinised on them. There will be a time and a place for a reset on those priorities. There is a climate emergency. We ourselves have raised the bar quite a lot. We look at the 2025 target about once a month, and the paper that Cabinet's taking tomorrow is a reflection of that. So what I would say is I think it does sort of reinforce the view that this is business that we do that should be scrutinised, which no doubt will be a very important part of a future administration's priorities, and there may well need to be a reset. But we're not going quiet and we're not stopping work between now and May. There is a huge and ambitious agenda we're still delivering.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Councillor Fodor, I think you're going to be the last person.
Okay, thanks, Chair. And thank you for the clarification of the climate emergency action plan, which is the administration's programme, and it's been regularly reported and scrutinised already as the council's sort of internal initiatives. I think maybe just a couple of thoughts of clarification, because this working group, as a cross-party working group, was set up by Scrutiny, but two of the things we emphasised most, I think, while we were going along is first, certainly I said this many times, is the working group as a cross-party working group adding value? And whatever we did, we tried to pick topics where we could add value to explore and understand and recommend based on what we were concluding from our deliberations. And secondly, could we show that there will be and continue to be a cross-party consensus going forwards before the committee system is set up? And that's something we tried very hard, and while we didn't get a majority in favour of continuing some of the work towards that, by far most people on the working group agreed we should continue to do some work, because we want to show that this is a programme that will have cross-party support at a time in the future when there is cross-party committee work in the policy and decision-making side of the council, which you know, at present it's been a Mayor and Cabinet programme that's directed the work of Alex Minchell and all the other officers. So we were trying to show that we endorsed the work, we understood it, and we could see the benefit and the need for added value in our deliberations. And we thought there's more to do on that. And that's why I would certainly argue we shouldn't stop that political cross-party oversight at this stage before the committees are set up next May.
Thank you, Martin. I think I'll just make one comment in direct response to that, is that there are multiple ways that we can show cross-party support for activities related to climate change, and part of that is making statements to Cabinet in support of initiatives that do tackle climate change, when even if we may have some differences about aspects of those, and you've done that yourself when the City Leap item was approved by Cabinet. And I think this is a difficult situation, but we are also facing something that we are going to be facing when we move to the committee model as well, which is limited resources to do a wide range of things that we would all like to do. And I think what we're being asked to do, we've commented upon the report. The next action is refer it to Cabinet. What I think we then need to do is see what response there is from Cabinet, but we then need to have a further discussion about what type of further action we decide needs to take place, and if we decide there is a need to continue with the work of the committee model, of the climate change working group, or to have an inquiry day or some other solution, we then need to look at what resources are required to do that and whether those resources are available or whether we will need to stop doing something else. So on that basis, unless there are any objections, I'm going to recommend that we refer the report to Cabinet for the October Cabinet, and then once we get a response from Cabinet, that we arrange a OSM meeting, not a public OSM meeting. We need to have this conversation in detail and go through what our resources are available, what plans we have as a scrutiny as a whole, to look at other things that are also important, such as adult social care, SEND, HRA, and so on. So unless anybody has any objection to that, that's what my recommendation would be. Does anybody have any objections? Councillor Gollop.
Not an objection, but the only thing I would suggest is to put a timeline in if you're asking Cabinet to respond. Otherwise, we might well find it's, given the pressures that Cabinet are under, it might well be March or April before we got a response. So just putting that targeted timeline would help.
Yeah, I think if we're delaying the report so that it's not going to tomorrow, but it's going to the October Cabinet, then I think we should expect to have a response at that October Cabinet. Is everybody happy with me to refer that on this basis? Okay, so be it. Thank you, Katie, for your presentation and the work that you and the rest of your working group have put in to date.
Thank you, Chair, for hearing me out. And just one last final word, which is to say, I really think that joined-up discussion was important, because I think it isn't about the importance of the topic we're discussing that is unquestioned. It is about whether, as you all have said, is this working group adding any value? Are we coming up with recommendations that are useful? I mean, that is obviously that question for scrutiny generally. Are we doing anything useful? I sometimes think, God, we councillors float around just causing headaches for officers who are doing the actual work. But that can't be true. It can't be true that we're not doing anything useful. If you think about who councillors are, they're...
Katie, sorry, but I mean, we made the decision to move forward.
Yeah, I see it's too late for this, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Agenda item 10 and 11 are the Q4 performance reports and the Q1 corporate risk. Now, if we remember, we've agreed that these reports are being brought to OSM mainly for noting. If there were particular items on them that members of OSM wanted to discuss, that they would forewarn us so we can bring officers along in order to respond. But also to remember these performance reports and corporate risks will be going to your own individual scrutiny commissions. With that in mind, does anybody have anything they do want to raise as a general comment about items? Councillor Gollop and Councillor Townsend afterwards.
Mine was just a general comment that I scribbled when I was reading the first page of this. The first page talks about the percentages that are on or above target. It looked like an element of spin, because there could equally have been a summary of the percentage that were on or below target. And I just think it's a pity in a document like this, which is for information and guidance, that it it gave the feeling that the covering paper was being presented in a way that was trying to turn the figures. I don't think there was any need for that, and I think that devalues it. So I'm really just passing that comment on. The other issue, it seemed to me, I don't know how we segregate the risks, and I suspect if we did, we'd all do it differently. But I see some that I look at that think, oh, that's a pity we're not doing well on that one, but actually it's not disastrous, it's not a high priority. There are some others that for me, are very high priority that we are doing badly on. Now, I don't know whether others would share the views of those concerns, but it just seemed to me that we're still not measuring and segregating what should be the top priority. And I just think that somehow we need to refine that and what we really need to be concentrating on. And I'm saying that in general rather than going into the specifics at this point.
Okay. Councillor, I can, on the risk point, I mean, I can certainly say that things have moved on a lot for the better over the last 12 to 18 months. We've got the Pentana risk system in. This is effectively the system that spits out this information. Of course, it's only as good as the stuff that's put in, but the way that we calibrate risk is consistent. It goes across the board. It is checked, and from an officer perspective, the way that things are then categorised into a corporate, a directorate or a service risk is very clear and well understood internally. So if there are issues about how it then gets translated into documents that you see, we can always take that on board. But I can speak from experience to say that officers are finding this an improved system, and what it's often doing actually is you're finding yourself having conversations about things that aren't on here. Because obviously the things that are on here, you have to have the conversation, and it's the recognition that everything has its own risk score, and officers need to understand that, because if they're trained properly, then the system does a lot of the work for you, and things then rise to the top. They have done. I mean, I could pick out any one here, but that's not the purpose of this meeting. You'll see them in your scrutinies, but there are some in here which, frankly, the risk reporting itself was the means by which we got the conversation flowing. Councillor Renhard will know about one in particular in his area. It is working, but if there's something that's not working for you, please do let us know, and we'll always try and improve the way it's being presented here.
Thank you, Jeff. Councillor Townsend.
Thanks. So mine is about most of the boxes that are kind of looking at the last 12 months are empty. I find that a bit disconcerting, given that these are largely areas that we've been working on for years and years and years. That the arrows to say whether they're going up, going down, staying the same, the arrows box on the performance. And then there's the odd box that doesn't have any comment at all next to it at the end. And then there's other boxes that have got sort of whole paragraphs and things like that. So I'm trying to understand why it is that there's more information for certain areas and then appears to be very, very little for other targets at the end of the financial year, basically, where I would expect most information and all the boxes to be completed. Otherwise...
Okay, I think that's one that need to be taken away so we can get an explanation as to why there is different levels of information. I know in the past there have been situations where a target is a new target or a measurement is a new measurement or one is changed, and that sometimes has affected how much information is available to report on. But Stephen, can you...
No, it's a fair point. I'm noticing the same thing, and it didn't come up. But as you've quite rightly said, if it doesn't have an explanation, well, we need to know why, so we'll take that away.
Okay, thank you. And the other one is that there's one area in here that is clearly underperforming, and I'm interested in where the accountability for that area lies. The transport and whatever it was clearly is pretty much red and dark red, and that really that's really concerning, because that's been a target for about 20 years.
So if you look at the specifics, there are a relatively small number of reasons why that is the case, and it's something which I think should be put to the cabinet member for transport, and it can be dealt with. I think it'll presumably be GNR, but the chair was actually did ask if there were questions. We would make sure we had the right officers here. Obviously, off the cuff, I can tell you that one of the significant issues is that we've been unable to agree, for example, schemes with the West of England Combined Authority, which you may have seen in the press recently, have resulted in some comments about consultation. So there are political reasons as well as operational reasons, but they need to be addressed by the cabinet member.
Who I presume will attend GNR when your next GNR meeting is. Okay, Councillor Wilcox, you're next. Talking of transport.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I don't want to raise any particular transport issues because I'm looking forward to them coming to GNR, and I'm looking forward to the cabinet member attending. So while we've got the cabinet member for housing in the room, I would like to bring up page 104, which has an alarming amount of red on it. Could we actually bring them on out, please, Brian? 104, page 104. Okay. It's got 3 performance metrics on it. Reduced average relet times, which is significantly worse than target of 99 days when it should be 50. Reduced the number of empty council properties, which is significantly worse than target. With 351 is the actual when it should be 150. And we've already talked about the increase in the number of affordable homes delivered in Bristol, where the Q4 target is 309. But the Q4 actual delivery is 309 and the annual target is 500. Can the cabinet member for housing address how we're going to fix the first 2, please? Because we've already talked about the third.
I'll take the opportunity to address the third. You'll be able to help me with that one, Councillor Wilcox. So in terms of voids, I've recently met with the head of service, and Stephen Peacock was also in that meeting with the mayor where we've done a review of what actions are going to be put in place to improve voids. There's a whole host of reasons why there are challenges around voids, turnaround time. Some of it's to do with the conditions of the properties, like the state they are being returned in is not a very good state. Availability of contractors, availability of surveyors within our own service, and there is a workforce challenge across the piece around that. But there's some focus work happening, and we'd be happy to update growth and regeneration scrutiny, or come here if you like, with more detail on that, because there is some work that's been kicking off around that. Just on housing delivery, there's a few things we can also do to improve things there. One of them, of course, is councillors not calling in things unnecessary to planning committee. So it may be worth having a chat about the Cameron Centre that's had a low number of objections, and the main objection seems to be the views of Stoke Park, with a scheme that's going to be 37 council homes and a new, much bigger community centre, helping to finish off the regeneration of Gainsborough Square. You've called it in, so should we chat about that?
Okay, I'm going to jump in here because this is scrutiny, and I want to keep it very much to the scrutiny, and I'm going to reiterate what I said at the beginning, that when we bring these items on the performance and the corporate risk, that when they are published and are available, it would be very helpful, as I requested previously, that you do give us advance warning of any errors you want to bring up in the meeting, so that we can do it in a way that is both informative and does not descend into political back and forth. So with that in mind, I am going to go to Councillor Smith.
Thank you, and apologies, I didn't raise anything in advance. As a new member, I wasn't aware that we were supposed to do that, but I will in future. But it's not a point of detail anyway, just a general comment that Stephen may or may not want to respond to. But my reading of this is when you make a plan, you decide what it is you want to achieve, and then you design a set of actions that are going to get you there. And what I'm seeing here is that on the actions, we're doing quite well. We've achieved, or we're on track for 82%, was it, of what we said we were going to do. But in terms of what those actions are supposed to be achieving, we're only on track for about half of it. So that suggests to me that either we're setting targets that are really, really ambitious, which may be a good thing, but that means we're not meeting them, or we've chosen the wrong actions, and the actions that we're doing aren't getting us to the targets, the outcomes that we want to achieve. Is that a fair reading, or am I missing something in here?
It's a very deep question, and the answer is yes. You've got it right. There is a preponderance of measuring activity over outcomes, which is not unique to this council, and we are trying to close that up. But measuring something by getting it in one's inbox and out of it is not the same as achievement on the ground. That isn't to say there aren't thousands of people working really, really hard, but when you try and pull that all together into a plan, sometimes you can confuse activity for achievement. So it's the old school report, isn't it? So I would say yes, and we're on it, and we're trying our very best every year to get a little bit better. But I think there will always be a bit of a distance between activity measurement and impact measurement. The one that matters, as you say, is what gets done.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone. Okay, we got 3 more items. These are usually items that we just note. Item number 12 is the work programme. I've said it before, but I am going to say it again, is that it would be preferable if the work programme gave much better notice of items that are coming to Cabinet. At the moment, we do seem to have got stuck in a situation where we're not seeing anything beyond the next Cabinet, and that can be unhelpful from a scrutiny point of view. Agenda item number 13 is the... Sorry, I got that a bit confusing. The forward plan was what I was referring to. Our work programme is something it looks like we're going to have to go and look at in a bit more detail, depending on what we decide to do about the climate change working group. So agenda item number 13 is the forward plan. So everything I just said, pretend I was talking about agenda item 13 from the beginning, and I'll chat with Tom about editing that to make me look less stupid. And then the final item for note is the WECA meeting minutes. Councillor Gollop.
Sorry, I don't know whether I can do this, but I had on the forward plan there is the item about the period 4 finance monitor, which is going to Cabinet, which we haven't had time of scrutiny to look at. Can I give notice of a question, and I don't necessarily expect Stephen to answer it now because that would be unfair, but on page 14 of the of that report, there's a reference to a saving of £5 million from the transport levy, and I just don't understand how we can be saving £5 million from the transport levy, and I'm just wondering if it's possible to have an explanation of what that is, given it's a fairly contentious issue.
You're quite correct. I haven't got the information in front of me. The Cabinet report is published, but as you just indicated, I wasn't prepared for the question. So I'm sure that if I relay your question to the administration, they will pick it up in their introduction and their covering comments tomorrow.
If possible, and this is part, and I understand why reports come out late, but when they come out late, there isn't the time to read them, which means there isn't the time to put in questions to the right place at the right time, which is why I've benched it on you today. But it would just be helpful to understand what that is. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Thank you to everybody on OSM. Thank you to whoever's left in the room. Thank you for Dan, you're still here. And I bring to a close this meeting of the Overview Scrutiny Management Board. Thank you all very much.